It is stats time. I read the most books I've ever read in a year in 2024, 200, with over 60,000 pages. How? Not entirely sure. Not about to complain about it. To compare that to 2023, when I read 86 books and just over 30,000 pages, the fact that I've more than doubled what I read last year in what was supposed to be a chill and relaxing reading year is both impressive and concerning. So the difference between this year and last year is almost 30,000 pages and is an extra 9 books each month. An extra 9 books every month I managed to read in 2024 compared to 2023. I can tell you right now, 2025 has already slowed down and I'm fine with that. I'm reading an amount I'm happy with. Dear God! Here are my reading stats for each month, so you can see those. I read quite a few pages. I had a few spikes and a few troughs, but I had a really good reading year. I still can't believe how amazing it went. If you see me looking across to the side, it's because this is where the laptop is with the data. So I read 54% of my reading through physical books. That is a massive drop from last year where 86% of my reading was physical. But I'm glad about it because reading audiobooks allows me to read while I'm at work, and I got through clearly a lot more using that method than I did before. I read across 18 genres, which is not that different from the 17 in 2023, so not much change there, but I finished 15 series compared to the 5 that I finished in 2023. I tried to make that a priority in the second half of the year, and it really worked. It really came through. I have finished off a lot of series that have been sat on my TBR for a long, long time. My average rating was 4 stars, and that's the same as it was last year, off by a few decimal points, and I'm really happy with that. I'm really happy that I'm still enjoying everything that I'm reading, even though the quantity went up by so much. I read a lot of different authors. 2023 I read from 75 different authors. 2024 I read from 157. So out of the 200 books, the vast majority, over three quarters, was from a different author. That's mad. That's ridiculous. How did I manage that? Unfortunately, one stat that I'm really genuinely displeased with is my authors of colour, and that has went down. I had in 2023 read 34% authors of colour. In 2024 that is down to 28%. I am really not happy with that. I understand why it happened though. So 2024 was the first year where I've made a concerted push to read through my physical TBR, and my physical TBR is primarily white because it has been accumulated over the past decade now, and when I first started accumulating it was all the authors I'd heard of online. They are mainly white. So I'm working on it, I'm improving it. I do have a lot of diversity on my shelves from later years. I knew this was going to happen. I knew that I was going to be going whiter, and I'm still really annoyed about it. In terms of like how I'm going to combat that in 2025, I'm going to have to try and actively pick up the newer books, even though I'm trying to get through my backlog, to make sure that this is balancing out. But unfortunately it is something that's going to happen unless I just unhaul all of my books. Those are my 2 options really, just because they are so primarily white. I've considered it. If you have any helpful ideas for me down below, especially if you are someone who is not white, I would very much appreciate hearing how you think I should tackle this problem, because a big percentage of my owned TBR is white because I've owned it for so long. So I keep reading the authors of colour faster and so they don't live on the old TBR, so then when I'm now focusing on the old TBR, excuses. Translated books. Last year, 2023, I read 10 translated. In 2024, I read 14. So a few more, not loads, but a few more. And in terms of reading books not in English, in 2023 I read 1 book in Swedish, and in 2024 I read 4 books. 2 in Swedish, 1 in German, and 1 in Scots, like pure Scots, which is why I've counted it. So a little better there, and I have a fair few Swedish books I still need to get through, so if I manage to get to them in 2025, that number's gonna go up. I'm really happy with this one. As someone who only speaks one language, being able to add in more books from different cultures in their own language, I'm very, very pleased that I've been able to do more of that. This stat, the number of hours for audiobooks. So 2023 was 153 hours of audiobooking. 2024 was 861. So you can see where a lot of those 120-ish books extra came from, was the audiobook hours. I really, really lent into audiobooks this year, well last year, and I haven't done so yet in 2025, and I need to get back into it because clearly it's a very good way for me to get through my books. I've been getting audiobooks of books that I own, so I'm still getting through my TBR, but it means that like I said, I can read them while I'm out walking or travelling, and I can also read them while I'm actively at work. Very lucky I can do that, and it means I have so many more hours per day to get reading in. I read a lot less new authors this year as well. I say a lot. In 2023 it was 62% of my authors were brand new to me, and in 2024 it was 53%, so a notable drop. And I think part of that is because I was reading primarily from my own shelves, so I've read from a lot of the authors that I have here already, and that's why I have more books from them. So I'm not mad at that one. I think it makes a lot of sense to be reading a lot more from authors that I already know about when I'm trying to read from my TBR. Now, from the comparative stats to just stats from 2024. So let me shuffle again, because we definitely will need space for photos here. So age category, I read 76% adult. I read 17% young adult and 6% middle grade. I'm rounding up, so these numbers don't make 100, it's fine. I am surprised that the young adult was still so high, but I'm not surprised that it's primarily adult. I have fully moved into the adult genre now, and a lot of the YA is stuff that has been on my TBR that I'm getting through. Is primarily the YA now. Not mad about that, it's just kind of how it happened. If I'd stuck with YA I would have been perfectly happy, but I didn't, and that's fine. Then we have the book format. So I read 59% of my books via novels, with some comics, some poems, some novella, and then a fair whack 22% non-fiction. I love that I'm reading this much non-fiction. It's a good amount for me. I am primarily a fiction reader, but I'm very happy that I am getting through a fair quantity of non-fiction each year. I really, really enjoy a good non-fiction. So yeah, I'm very happy with this percentage breakdown. For the book length, unsurprisingly, there are a lot of books that are shorter. But I did read a fair number of bigger ones. I read just under 15 books that were over 500 pages. I'm okay with that. I'm happy with that. I think, you know, it's more than one a month, and big books can be quite intimidating, so I'm quite happy with that stat. So for the original language that the book was in, the highest percentage just is Japanese at just under 30%. I'm not surprised. I love a good Japanese novel in translation. They are absolutely beautiful. I wish that was higher because I wish I had more of them on my TBR, but I've read them all. For the books per publisher, I know this one is very, very hard to read, but I'm pretty sure that spike is because of Discworld. I read a lot of Discworld books this year, so I am pretty sure that that spike is from that. Not sure exactly where the other spike is from, but everything else has been pretty even and pretty spread out across a large number of publishers. I'm surprised at the number of different publishers I've read. Speaking about the genres in more depth, unsurprisingly, 45% of my books were fantasy. Then the next highest percentage is non-fiction at 19%. Not surprised by this in the slightest. This breaks down exactly how I would have expected. The only difference is that I'm surprised about how big historical fiction is at 5%. Then for where I got the books from, so primarily 51% of the books were owned already in my life. Very glad that just over half were already from my TBR shelves, which means I should have moved 100 books off of my TBR shelves. And yet I brought loads in. And then the next highest percentage is ARCs at 14%. I ended up stopping requesting NetGalley ARCs in like March, and then I started getting physical ARCs in like July. For representation in my books, 60 books did not have LGBTQ+ representation in, and 54% of them did not have disability representation in. Again, I understand why that is. That doesn't mean I'm happy with it. I'm very unhappy with it, but I do understand why and how that's happened with me reading older books. Annoying though. The number of books per author. Oh, I love this graph. Take a look at this here. It is just bam, Terry Pratchett. I've been reading at least one book from Discworld each month, along with the little novellas as well. Bam! Oh, love that. Publication year. Ooh, okay, so my biggest percentage at 19% is books from 2024, and I'm pretty sure that is from the ARCs that I was receiving. So that explains that. The next biggest percentage is 2021. So I was getting through some of my older but not old books. But as you can see, it is very broken up and from lots of different years, so I really was getting through that backlist. Reading method! So, primarily physical still at 54%, but 29% were audiobook, and 10% were mixed media, so I physically read it and audiobooked it combined. If I add them together, that's like 40%. I'm happy with that, I'm happy with that. In terms of series that I started this year, I started 26. And read 48 sequels. Considering I only finished 15 series, that could have been better. But most of my reading was standalone, which could explain some of that, so 56% of my reading was standalone reading. And the last stat I'm going to look at is the gender of the author. So there are some where either I don't know the gender of the author, they are non-binary, or it was multiple authors from different genders writing. 55% of my writing was from women. That is the lowest that percent has been in a long time. Again, I think part of this was trying to read the backlist. I had backlists of men on my TBR, and so I think I've finally been getting to them, which is good, but I find that fascinating. Nothing wrong with reading men or women, but you know, I want a good mix of both, but it's never been so low on the women before. And as always, this was a very messy video. I am not good at relaying these stats, but hopefully you've found something interesting. If you've reached this far into the video, let me know how many books you read last year. Just to be clear, it doesn't matter if it was 0 or if it was 700. I don't know how the fuck I managed 200, but I'm very pleased with myself for managing to read so much, but that doesn't mean it's better than reading one book. It's as long as you're reading, that's the important thing. So, let me know how many books you read last year, and I will see you for the rest of 2025. Bye!